There's a moment, a silent split-second decision you make when someone calls you out, accuses you, questions your worth, your character, your intent. And in that moment, the average person does what they were trained to do. They defend themselves. I didn't mean it. That's not what I was trying to say. You misunderstood me. I swear I'm not like that. It sounds noble, reasonable, fair. But to Machiavelli, it's the moment you lose everything. Because the second you defend yourself, you admit you're weak enough to need to. And in power games, perception is everything. If they see you flinch, they don't see a victim. They see blood. This is the brutal law Machiavelli understood before anyone else. The man who defends himself lowers himself. The man who doesn't forces the world to defend him instead. Let's get one thing straight. Defending yourself rarely convinces anyone. What it does is shift the power away from you. Because when you justify your actions, you're playing on their field. You're accepting their framing. You're saying without realizing it, you have the authority to question me. And once they have that, they own the narrative. Even if you're right, you still look guilty. Because only the weak rush to explain. The strong? They let the silence burn. They let the accusation float, untouched. Because they know the real move is this. Turn the accusation into a mirror. Make them doubt themselves. Make them look too emotional. Make them look obsessed, bitter, unstable. Because the one who speaks first often loses control of the frame. And Machiavelli knew. Whoever controls the frame controls the outcome. Most people defend themselves because they want to be understood. They believe if they just explain enough, clarify enough, repeat themselves enough, they'll be vindicated. But that belief comes from a place of emotional weakness, not strategy. You don't want clarity, you want control. Clarity is for therapy, control is for power. And power doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being feared, respected, and untouchable. So when someone calls you arrogant, cold, selfish, manipulative, and you immediately say, "No, you don't understand," you've already lost. Because now you're reacting. Now you're proving you care. Now you've put the ball in their court. And when you do that, you give up the most Machiavellian thing you have: mystery. Think of the most powerful people you've ever encountered. Not the loudest, not the most liked. The ones who held silence like a weapon. The ones who made you second-guess yourself just by staring. The ones who, when attacked, never flinched. Machiavelli would tell you this. He who explains submits. He who remains silent forces others to fill in the blanks, and they often overestimate him. That's the game. When you don't react, they get uncomfortable. They start doubting their own words. They look around for validation and find none. Suddenly, their power shrinks while yours expands. Because you've done the one thing no emotional person can handle, you made them talk to themselves. And that's how you flip the power. You let their accusation die in the echo of its own weakness. Let's go deeper. You walk into a room. Someone throws shade, subtle or direct, maybe a jab at your success, your attitude, your past. Everyone turns to see what you'll say, and here's your move. Say nothing. No defense, no retaliation, no smirk, just calm, total stillness. In that moment, you are untouchable, because everyone in the room is now forced to ask, why didn't he react? Does he know something we don't? Is he above this? Did that attack just make him stronger? You just flipped the entire social frame. Because people aren't watching the accusation, they're watching your response. And silence, when delivered with presence, speaks louder than any justification ever could. Machiavelli knew this. He didn't just study politics, he studied psychology. And he understood one thing better than anyone. Power isn't what you say. It's what people believe you could say, but choose not to. Now, here's the coldest move of all. Sometimes you don't just ignore the accusation, you invert it. Someone calls you manipulative, Smile, look past them and say if that's how you see it. Not defensive, not apologetic, just cool, neutral detachment. What happens? They scramble because they were hoping for a fight. They were hoping to watch you squirm. Instead, they're left holding their own weapon. That's when the guilt sets in on their side. They start wondering if they overstepped, if they embarrassed themselves, if they look insecure now. And guess what? They do. You just took the energy they threw at you and made them carry it without lifting a finger. There's a moment when silence becomes unbearable, not for you, but for the one who expected a reaction. That's when the tables turn. They thought they were the accuser. Now they're exposed as the one begging for attention. And you just became something far more powerful than innocent. You became untouchable. Machiavelli understood something that most people will never grasp. Words are not to clarify truth, but to obscure it. And when someone attacks you, subtly or directly, they want you to fight the fog. They want to drown you in emotional explanation, because the more you explain, the less certain you appear. So instead, let them fill the silence. And what happens? They overplay. They repeat themselves. They start looking desperate, emotional, unstable. You said nothing, but now they're the one under judgment. Because the crowd isn't listening to what's being said. They're watching who's calm and who's rattled. That's social power. And it doesn't come from being right. It comes from being untouchable. Let's say you're in a business meeting. Someone subtly undermines you, says, "I'm not sure that strategy is really thought through," or "He always has these bold ideas." They're looking for a reaction. They want you to bite. What do most people do? They lean forward, they explain, they prove, they clarify, they get nervous. The room smells it. But the Machiavellian operator? He leans back. He waits, maybe even smirks. And if he speaks, it's not a defense. It's a redirect. Let's hear your strategy then. Now the attacker has to perform. And the room flips. Suddenly they are being evaluated. They are under pressure. Because silence from the confident is accusation without words. It makes people feel small without you doing anything. In romantic or personal relationships, this is even more dangerous. Say your partner says, "You don't care about me anymore." The average person will panic. They'll launch into explanations, reassurances, defenses, and in doing so, they validate the emotional frame. But the Machiavellian approach is different. You don't dismiss them. You don't argue. You let the weight of the accusation hang. You watch them feel their own drama echo in the space. Then, with calm, you respond, "That's not how I see it." Short, grounded, no explanation, no justification. Now they feel uncertain. They question their own tone. They wonder if they were too reactive. Because in that moment, you held power over what matters most, the emotional tempo. And whoever controls the tempo controls the frame. There's a deeper tactic, and it's even colder. Don't just remain calm when accused. Disappear. Someone insults you? Don't reply, don't respond, don't acknowledge. But don't block them either. Let your absence sit like a mirror. Let them sit in the silence of being ignored. This breaks people in two ways. They realize you didn't even deem them worthy of a response. They start spinning internal narratives, and most of the time it destroys their composure. Why? Because the average person survives on emotional validation, even in conflict. If you take that away, they wither, they spiral, they post more, they talk to others, they try to bait a reply. And with every new attempt, they look weaker, more obsessed, more unhinged, all while you remain perfectly still. And that's when you win, not because you proved anything, but because they destroyed themselves trying to get a reaction from you. Here's where it gets elite. Instead of defending yourself when attacked, make their accusation look like a sign of weakness. Someone calls you arrogant? Strange that confidence makes people so uncomfortable. Someone says you're manipulative. Only people who can't be influenced say that. Someone calls you fake. Everyone says that when they stop getting what they want. You don't just deny the accusation, you make it their insecurity. And now they're the ones scrambling to defend themselves. It's not just a reversal, it's a power judo throw. You used their own emotional force and turned it into their public collapse. Machiavelli would call this the turn of the blade. Do not meet the sword with a shield. Let the attacker fall on his own blade. The world teaches you to defend your reputation, to explain yourself, to clear your name. But Machiavelli saw the trap. He knew that the moment you chase innocence, you admit guilt. So the true strategist never plays that game. Instead, he appears too composed to be shaken, too elevated to care, too clear on his position to explain it. And slowly, those who try to tear him down start looking unstable, reactive, jealous, weak. Because the more you defend, the more it looks like you need to. But the more you ignore, the more dangerous they assume you are. And that assumption is where power is born. Most people think power is about proving yourself, proving you're right, proving you're not what they say you are, proving you're better than their perception. But Machiavelli would smirk at this, because the second you try to prove anything, you've already declared the other person's judgment valid. And when you hand someone that validation, you hand them your leash. Let's say you're in a group, a social setting, a dinner table, a meeting. Someone throws a public jab. You always act like you know everything. Oh, he's always like this. I guess being humble isn't your thing. What do most people do? They tense up. They try to laugh it off, or worse, they respond with an explanation, trying to smooth it over. And they think they're saving face. But what they're really doing is confirming that a hit was landed. Now everyone's watching the defense. And that alone makes the original jab look true. Here's what the Machiavellian does instead. Pause. Hold silence for just 2 seconds. Scan the room not with aggression but with quiet amusement. Then, and only if needed, offer something calm, precise, and dismissive. You seem emotional today. Or, interesting take. Or nothing at all. Just a long, still gaze. What happens next is predictable. The attacker shifts. They fidget. They look for backup. They try to explain their joke. They feel the heat of the room shifting onto them. Because your lack of reaction just told the room something louder than words ever could. You're not the one under judgment. They are. In the digital arena, things escalate even faster. Comments, posts, call-outs, DMs. People trying to bait you into reacting. Here's the truth Machiavelli would burn into your mind. In the court of public opinion, silence speaks guilt unless your silence commands fear. So here's the tactic. When you're attacked online, don't defend, don't explain, distort. You don't address the claim. You redirect the energy back into the crowd. Example, someone says you're toxic or manipulative. Instead of posting a tearful defense or long clarification, you post, "People always call you dangerous when they can't control you. What just happened?" You didn't defend. You reframed the accusation into a badge of power. Now they look bitter. You look unfazed. And the audience? They begin to question who's really in control. That's not damage control. That's narrative dominance. Let's get even more surgical. There are 3 tools you can use instead of defending yourself. Silence, the default. Cold, powerful, leaves them exposed. Deflection, reframe the narrative without acknowledging the jab. Precision cuts, short, sharp truths that end the game immediately. Examples. Someone says, "You're full of yourself." You respond, "Confidence upsets the insecure." They say, "You're fake." You respond, "I don't owe you authenticity." They say, "You think you're better than everyone." You respond, "No, I just don't think like everyone." These aren't defenses, they're status assertions. They don't say, "I'm not guilty." They say, "You can't touch me." And that's the core. The Machiavellian never begs to be seen as good. He dares people to see him as bad and walks taller for it. When you refuse to defend yourself, something strange happens to your enemies. They become unhinged because they expected a battle, and instead, they're swinging at smoke. They start escalating. They push harder. They get more dramatic. They expose more of their insecurity. And the more they do, the more you rise in the eyes of others. Why? Because you've made them perform their own collapse. And that's the Machiavellian endgame. You don't destroy your enemies. You let their obsession with you destroy them. You think being misunderstood is dangerous, but being predictable is far worse. The misunderstood man has mystery. The predictable man is easy to manipulate. People who are always trying to clear things up are seen as desperate. People who remain calmly misunderstood, they are feared. Machiavelli knew this. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But even more, it's better to be confusing than predictable. Because the confused man is cautious. He watches you. He doesn't act rashly. And that means you control the field. Let's crush the final illusion. You don't need a good reputation to win. You need a strong one. The man with a good reputation is expected to be clean, soft, agreeable. The man with a strong reputation, he's not always liked, he's not always trusted, but no one dares move against him casually. That's what happens when you never defend yourself. Your reputation becomes not about what people believe, but what they fear you'll do next. That's how you flip the power. You stop fighting for approval, and instead you create an aura that makes people cautious. Because even your silence feels like a decision, and every move you don't make becomes a move in their mind. The final evolution is not silence, it's aura, a presence so composed, so secure, so far above the petty noise that accusations simply evaporate before they land. And this doesn't come from being emotionless, it comes from being unbothered by design. Because once you've trained yourself not to defend, not to explain, not to seek validation, you cross a line where your existence becomes the defense. And that's when power becomes effortless. Think about the few people in life who never explain themselves. They don't post long rants. They don't correct the record. They don't argue with critics. And yet, people respect them more. Why? Because silence in the face of accusation creates myth. It invites interpretation. And the human mind, when left without an explanation, fills the void with strength. People assume you must be dangerous. You must know something they don't. You must be so secure in who you are that you don't even blink when challenged. And that assumption, that's what makes people follow you. Machiavelli didn't care about being good. He cared about being in control. And the one who never defends is always in control of perception, even when surrounded by lies. Here's the paradox. The more you explain yourself, the more alone you look, because no one feels the need to step in when you're already arguing on your own behalf. But if you remain calm, if you stand silent, unfazed, people start to feel the urge to defend you. They say, "That was uncalled for. He didn't deserve that. Why are you coming after him? He didn't even respond and you're still pushing." Suddenly, they become your shield. And what's better than defending yourself? Letting others do it for you without asking. That's Machiavellian leverage. Let the crowd argue your case while you remain above the noise. Now you're not just respected, you're elevated. It doesn't happen overnight. You build it like a fortress, stone by stone, by acting with restraint, by choosing stillness over reaction, by never explaining more than you must. Start here. Never correct insults that are clearly meant to provoke. Let them speak. Let them echo. Your silence tells the room that the insult didn't even register on your radar. Respond to indirect shots with calm confusion, not offense. Is that how you see it? Said with total serenity, it dismantles the emotional energy behind their attack. Use short, closing phrases instead of defenses. Noted. Okay. Think what you like. Time will tell. Each one closes the door. It doesn't invite more debate. It ends the scene. Study how you hold your face, your body, your gaze. The Machiavellian never twitches, flinches, or tenses. Stillness is his armor. And the more still you are when others lose control, the more your power expands silently. When people don't know how to provoke you, they fear you, because you become unpredictable, not erratic, but unreadable, a mirror that reflects their own instability back at them. Machiavelli would say, "The most dangerous man is not the one who attacks first, it is the one who never needs to." You will reach a point where the attacks stop, not because you fought them, but because people know they'll lose before they start. Your presence says, "I don't play defense. I let others destroy themselves while trying to reach me." There is a difference between strength and immunity. Strength still flinches, still reacts, still gets emotional, even if it fights back. Immunity, it doesn't even acknowledge the hit. That's the Machiavellian ideal. You don't win the argument. You end the argument before it starts, by never needing to answer it. Because when you no longer defend yourself, people stop seeing you as someone who needs to be put on trial. You're not on their level. You've moved beyond the court of public approval, and the only judgment that matters, your own. From this point on, you don't live in defense. You live in definition. You define your image. You define your tone. You define your silence. And people feel that. They feel the certainty behind your eyes, the calmness in your posture, the danger in your quiet. You're not resisting anymore. You're commanding. And that's when the room shifts. The crowd speaks less. Your enemies grow quieter. Your name carries weight, not because you fought for it, but because you never explained it. Never defending yourself doesn't mean never speaking. It means speaking only when it shifts the power. When you say something, it should feel like a move, not a response. Because every time you don't explain yourself, every time you hold still while the world spins, you become the one thing they can't control, a man who answers to no one.